Fan games. I've talked about these in the past, but I haven't really made a video on the topic that pretty much addresses what my whole thoughts on the whole fan game theme are. So, in this video, I'll talk about the top 5 things wrong with fan games. But first, let me explain what a fan game is. A fan game is a computer or video game created by fans of things such as popular TV shows, fictional stories, or established video games. I've also seen them for various things such as celebrities. I've seen them for other things such as I've seen them even for books and stuff, and anime, and all sorts of stuff. And basically, they're created not by anybody official, but by random fans. And as this says, in the case of Sonic fan games, neither Sega or Sonic Team had a role in the game's development. All they did was make the original game, the assets, and whatever they modded. And many fan games vary from mods to games made off engines that they can get for free. And some of them are actually pretty popular, such as, let me use a good example, such as that one Street Fighter, Mega Man X Street Fighter, or whatever that game was called. Or another good example was when the one guy made the Sonic CD port, and Sega actually picked him up and commissioned him to actually make a Sonic CD port to all the mobile platforms, and that's how you got the modern version of Sonic CD. But for every half-decent fan game that actually gets big, removes the IP, and ends up as a standard game, or one that just gets notable, featured in gaming blogs for a day, there are other fan games that are just pure crap. And let me talk about the top 5 things wrong with these fan games. Reason number 5, no effort is put into many of these fan games, especially the terrible ones. Now, with PC gaming, there are many programs you can get from Multimedia Fusion 2 to Game Maker to RPG Maker VX, which basically let you make games without having to put any effort into them. Now, let's be honest, Multimedia Fusion 2 is kind of popular among fan game makers. Why? Not only does it require little to no effort, but there are actually pre-built engines and templates you can use to make your own Sonic fan game without having to put any effort into it whatsoever. Sonic World is a pretty good example. It's basically a fan game engine made for Multimedia Fusion 2, where all you have to do is use it to make your own Sonic fan games. Many Sonic fan games have been built in this engine, and an indie game, which originally was a Sonic fan game, is built on this engine too. Many Sonic fan games will have that Sonic World startup screen if they're on the PC because of how they used Multimedia Fusion 2 with the engine. It doesn't help that many of these fan games suffer from problems I'm going to mention later on in the video, but the fact that you can make a fan game without even having to try just already says what's going to be the next few things. So let's get to reason number 4. But another thing I thought I might as well mention, this isn't just with Sonic fan games. I've seen similar templates for other fan games. I've already seen an RPG Maker Pokemon one, for instance. Now to reason number 4. Reason number 4 is bad writing. This mostly applies to role-playing games and similar genres, however. Some people might remember, not long ago, I did a Let's Play, or attempted Let's Play, of Pokemon Ruby Destiny Life of Guardians. It was kind of a bad fan game, and I couldn't play much more because of how cringeworthy it was. But with it came a huge HTML thing with a ton of HTML pages about the storyline, about how deep this storyline was, and what did I get? Something that felt like it was a bad fan fiction plot. I mean, this pretty much has every cliche of a bad fan fiction, from throwing in random things such as, which are dark and edgy, such as Shadow Lugia, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, and of course making it sound like self-insert OC fanfiction. I've seen those too many times. Many fan games which have to have writing, such as Pokemon ones, or other role-playing game-based ones, happen to have bad writing. And that's because writing isn't just a fan fiction, especially if you're trying to make something people are going to play. This plot would not ship in a game, unless the standards were low. And it's not just this too. You can go to any fan game website and you'll see plenty of cliches. From Sonic fan games with self-inserts, overuse of the Chaos Emerald gimmick, etc., to Pokemon with its overuse of Shadow Pokemon, Mystery Dungeon crossovers, etc., or Ranger crossovers. If you have a story with those kind of cliches, you can already tell it's going to be generic, bland, forgettable, and cringeworthy. And yet, I see many games on Poke Community, Sonic fan sites, YouTube, with these cliches. I mean, for every half decent one, you'll see a bunch of games like this. Which brings me to point number 3. Reason number 3. Many ROM hacks play it safe or end up feeling the same. Now, this is basically the front page of a Pokemon hack website, or ROM hack, which is basically the same thing as modding. Now, on this, you can notice many trends, from having cliche fanfiction-like names, to sounding too much like the cliche Pokemon was mocked for, with having games named as colors. You know how people are making, when are they going to run out of color jokes? I've seen that before. This is basically what happens when they actually do that. When people actually run out of colors. You've got all these cliche names. I don't even need to read them off because there are so many of them. I can't make this up. Other common trends include being based off the same Generation 3 engine. Sometimes there will be a Generation 1 or 2 hack in there, but there isn't anything past Generation 4, and it's easy to see why. Generation 3 can be emulated on anything, from your PSP to your Windows XP or 2000 computer. And it also is easier to hack because there are far more tools for it. Generation 4, it's an 8-year-old game and nobody's really trying to mod it. That says something. A lot. And here's the thing. DS games are already easy to emulate now because computers have gotten more and more powerful. And many of these hacks also suffer from bad writing, which is especially critical when you're trying to play a role-playing game. While not only not adding very much new to the formula, sure, you'll see a new feature or two, which was backported from generations 4, 5, and 6. Like, let's just say, adding Mega Evolutions. I've seen people try to do that. I've seen people add X and Y, Diamond and Pearl, Black and White Pokemon. I've seen people add characters, regions, all that stuff, or attempt to. The only problem is, of course, if it's buggy or not. And of course, many of these were used by tools, which, like I said, that's another reason Generation 4 still hasn't been hacked yet. There aren't as many tools. But the last thing I thought I'd mention, why is it that there are so many games attempting to either remake older Pokemon generations or attempting to pretty much try to adapt the anime or manga story? Because I've seen so many of those anime-style hacks or manga-style hacks, and they just aren't original. But on to my next point, because this has to do with many of these ROM hacks or mods or fan games or whatever. Reason number 2, poor art direction. This can happen with so many kinds of games, especially ones involving sprites, because many of the times games with bad art directions, they don't even try to do 3D because it's too far beyond their skill level. But in many games with sprites, you have people attempting to make 8-bit, 16-bit sprites, which look terrible for various reasons. Years ago, when people made sprite-based games, they'd attempt to draw them to compensate for the system limitations, from using specific color palettes to doing other stuff such as designing the characters around the hardware. And of course, if you did it poorly, you'd end up with trash such as Pokemon Generation 1. Of course, Generation 1 also had a troubled development, but when sprites don't look very good for the hardware, this is what you end up with. But anyways, back on topic, many fan games don't try to make their games look 16-bit at all. And you'll notice this because the art style will look very bland like it was done in Microsoft Paint. However, what really makes a bad fan game stand out is when you have ROM hacks of, say, Pokemon or Sonic onto limited hardware such as the Game Boy Advance or the Sega Genesis/Mega Drive. On either of these, especially due to the Genesis's color palette being limited, you'll notice colors that are out of place due to how the color palette works on the system, and how developers of those other two systems had to adapt to the more limited color palettes available on those systems. And it's pretty easy to tell when a ROM hack looks out of place with the sprites, especially due to the coloring. But that's not just the only problem with the art direction. You see, many Pokemon or Sonic fan games decide to include original characters. And many of these characters are badly designed. Especially when it comes to stuff such as either Sonic fan characters, or worse, Pokemon characters, or Fakemon as they're called in the fan base. You'll see many of these which look plain, bleh, forgettable, generic, and not only that, but especially when you combine that with the bad art style, that makes them look even worse. I mean, it doesn't help when you're playing a Pokemon fan game and suddenly you see somebody's bad DeviantArt creation, which wouldn't even pass for, say, some guy's original creation on DeviantArt, which looks just bleh. I mean, I've seen that a lot. You'll see that a lot in Pokemon fan games because of how it looks. In Sonic fan games, they have that problem too. And there have been videos posted of people taking like a Sonic game and just recoloring sprites. I know that's an extreme example, but I've seen it happen in Sonic games too. Along with, like I said, inserting Generation 6 Pokemon to Generation 3. Like inserting Shadow into Sonic 1. Stuff like that. I've seen those. But speaking of self-inserts and bad character design, let's get to the number one problem with these fan games. Reason number one, they aren't original intellectual property. No matter how hard you try, no matter how much effort, no matter how many years you work on your fan game, no matter how much effort you put into it, it's still not your intellectual property. And this isn't more true than what happened with many fan games that got main media attention. For example, Chrono Trigger Resurrection. It was basically supposed to be a Chrono Trigger fan remake or something. And what happened? Well, Square Enix sent a cease and desist letter to it. And this isn't just Square Enix. Sega has done it in the past as well. And so has other companies such as Nintendo. Not with fan games, but with other stuff. Considering how in the past Nintendo has sent cease and desist orders to Cerebi.net and PokeBeach for leaking new Pokemon and other stuff, many Pokemon websites weren't even posting very much coverage of the new Pokemon games. And let me make this clear. As recent incidents have shown, from the Streets of Rage, the Chrono Trigger ones, to the My Little Pony fan games, it doesn't matter how much effort you put into it, how many years you put developing this game. If you use other people's intellectual property, you're opening yourself up for a lawsuit or something along the lines of that. And I'm just going to be honest here. Many times with stuff like this, you're in legal hot water when you do it. So, if you spend years working on a game that's a fan game, if you make character designs actually look memorable and not something out of DeviantArt, if you put all that effort into it, and it's still a fan game, you're in legal hot water. If you finish your game and it gets news coverage, somebody at Sega, Nintendo, Microsoft, they've done it. Anybody will send you a cease and desist order and tell you, please don't do this. And it doesn't matter if it's a ROM hack of a Pokemon game, or a Pokemon game you made on, say, the Unreal Development Kit. It doesn't matter if it's a Sonic game you made by just modifying the engine a little bit, or if it's a Sonic fan game you made with the Cry engine. It doesn't matter if it's any of that. If you use others' intellectual property, you can get a cease and desist order. And despite many companies turning the blind eye to that, the second they notice it, they have to do something, because that's how the law works with intellectual property. And the worst thing you can possibly do with this kind of stuff is use other intellectual property. For example, remember that one Pokemon ROM hack I mentioned? That one had more than just Pokemon intellectual property. It had music ripped from Kingdom Hearts, Chrono Cross, and Chrono Trigger, a big no-no, and Final Fantasy as well, a big no-no because of how Square Enix C&Ds. It also had music ripped from anime, from other random things, and if you played that, you know that project would be an intellectual property hell because of all the intellectual property they pretty much copied. And that really isn't a good thing if you're trying to make a game, especially a fan game. All in all, these are my thoughts on the issue. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more.